Good morning, everybody. Let's get started. Welcome to the Literary Translation Center. Welcome to the fair. We're going to kick off now with a conversation about bringing international literatures across cultures. I think that would be perhaps a more accurate title. But I'm Susan Harris. I'm the editorial director of Words Without Borders, an monthly online magazine of international literature in translation into English, based in the U.S. My panelists, I thought we'd start with by asking each panelist to introduce yourselves and talk a bit about your company, your organization, and how you bring literature, how you bring Indonesian and other literatures into being through your organizations.
Hi there. My name is Jerome. I work as a publisher. I founded my own little publishing venture back in 2014, and it's called Gentayu. Gentayu is the name of a mythical bird taken from the Ramayana epic, and I decided to actually focus on Asian literature, promoting Asian literature with French readers. I am French myself. And it's the current situation with French Asian literature in French translation at the moment is so that whenever you go to a bookstore, you would see quite a lot of books being translated, but most of them actually come either from China, from India, more and more from South Korea. Those three countries are actually, and Japan. Those four countries actually represent the big bulk of Asian literature being translated today and promoted to France and to the West in general. And I have myself lived in Asia for the past 16 years now, first in China, now in Malaysia. And I've always thought that there was something lacking there, that there were so many more stories that could actually be brought to French readers, and not only in the forms of novel, but also in the forms of short stories, because as you would probably know, novels, Asian or a lot of writers all around the world do write novels, but actually many more write short stories or poetry. And so I thought there was a big gap there between what was brought to us in terms of novels from China, Japan, South Korea, and India, and what was being written on the spot in other countries around Asia. And so I decided to create my own little literary journal, which I called Gentayu, that big bird from the Ramayana, who's actually very popular all around Asia, because the epic of the Ramayana has traveled around, and it's still being played in the form of wayang kulit, like puppet shows in all around Southeast Asia. And so it's that form of bird traveling without being faced to with any borders that I thought would represent my company well. So it comes in the form of a biannual literary journal, and it's got short stories and poetry from all over Asia. I work together with a network of literary translators who have, unfortunately, very little chance to promote their work with French publishers, because most of the time, the French publishers are not so keen, or they don't know enough, or they're a bit scared to move forward and to promote those works. But I give those translators a place where they can actually showcase their work and promote more of Asian literature. So that comes out every 6 months, and every year I also come up with a special issue of Gentayu dedicated to one particular country from Asia. So the past 2 years I had 2 books. One was Taiwan, one was Thailand. And just this year I came up with an Indonesia book. And I worked together with Lontar into bringing this project forward. And Lontar was instrumental in actually putting me in touch with the writers, with the right holders. And I had my own network of translators, 13 translators in all. Working from Indonesian into French, worked with me on that little book here.
Very good.
So that's about what I do. Yeah. Trying to promote more of Asian literature to French readers, not only the big countries, I would say, but all over Asia.
Okay. Thank you. Chanwoo?
Good morning, everyone. I'm from Literature Translation Institute of Korea, which is a state-run institute to promote Korean literature outside of Korea. So basically, we support translators and foreign publishers to translate and publish Korean literature in their own languages. So we have translation and publication grants program, and at the same time, we have started kind of new project in 2016, so-called two-way translation and publication project. So we launched publishing arm and imprint dedicated to foreign literature in translation. So we published Iranian poetry collection in 2016 in Korean, and also we published the Georgian short story collections in 2017. And we plan to publish Indonesian short stories collection probably this year or late next year. And also we're working with Belarusian Literary Institute. So the main purpose of our institute is to make a cultural exchange between Korean and other countries and other readerships around the world. So let me just briefly give you some statistics. So by 2018, so 1,361 titles have been published in 39 languages with our support. So which is approximately 1/3 of whole number of Korean literature in translation. So we also run various international exchange programs. We hold a Seoul International Writer Festival every October. So we actually invited Indonesian poet Nirwan Diwanto last year. So we hope to invite more Indonesian authors and other writers who are relatively now known in Korea. So that's probably all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm Judith Uiterlinde from World Editions. World Editions is a young publishing house focused on literature and translation and distributing into the UK and the US. I'm originally from the Netherlands, so our editorial head office is based in Amsterdam, and we have colleagues working from London and New York on promotion and distribution and sales. And being Dutch, being a small country, we're used to learn a lot of languages because nobody speaks Dutch. So that's one of our advantages, that we can read many languages, and it's always nice to be able to read the language you translate from. So we started, the publishing house started a few years ago in the UK, and only very recently, since I joined 2 years ago, we started also in the US. We started out with languages that, mainly that I can read. So Indonesia, I know a little bit of Bahasa, but not enough to read the whole book. So we have writers from Mozambique, from Colombia, from Spanish, Italian, German, French, lots of different languages. But now, we're ready to broaden that, because we want to be as diverse as possible, and we would very much like to publish authors from Indonesia, from Korea, from India. So we're open for suggestions, and Jérôme already told me about an interesting Indonesian author we are considering now, and my colleague next to me is going to introduce me into Korean literature. So this meeting is already very useful for me. Yeah. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Certainly. Yes, I think we will probably have concluded any number of deals among the four of us by the time we're done. One of the problems, or one of the challenges, I think, in publishing across cultures, across languages, of course, is finding work to publish. How do you find what you publish, especially where you, for languages where you don't read the language? Judith, you mentioned you've done a lot where you do read the language, but how do you source, how do you find the work from other languages and places?
Well, agents play an important role, publishers. So book fairs like this one are perfect occasions to meet up with other publishers and agents who can inform you about literature. And then what is very important is that the way it's presented, that you don't only get some information about the book, but that there's always a sample translation into English to be able to have a feel of what the writing is like. And it doesn't need to be the whole book, but at least a chapter or maybe a few chapters if possible. And for us it's also important to know background information about, for example, how has the book been received in the country it originates from? Has it had positive reviews? Has it been sold well? All these kind of. Is the author interested in traveling? Is she or he? Do they speak English, which is very helpful? Because it's always, you can always work with a translator or the interpreter, but the direct contact is always easier if it's possible. So yeah, that's and sometimes also translators have suggestions and come up to us with suggestions, which is always a very good way too, because they know they all seem to know each other, so you get lots of suggestions through them too. So it can come from you. Sometimes you read about an author. It can come from in very different ways. Yeah.
Jerome, how about you?
Well, as I said, I actually mostly work with literary translators. They are my main partners in this venture, because my publishing thing is a bit different from yours. You actually focus on novels, and I have this biannual coming out. Yeah, every 6 months. So I have to have a certain amount of material to fill in those pages, and the literary translators are the ones that are providing me with the material, and they speak the language. They've lived in those countries for a long time. For some of them, some of them are maybe still are there. They know the writers themselves. They know the publishers. So they have already all the contacts that are needed to actually make this the translation go forward. And they also are the best judges of whether a story could be of interest to French-speaking readers. And because they've actually lived long enough in the country, they've meddled with all the local writers, and they have this not only language understanding, but the whole cultural understanding with them. So it actually, I totally trust them whenever they actually come up to me and suggest to translate this or that short story. And every new issue comes out on a given theme. So I just have to give them the theme for the next issue, and they would actually come up with a few suggestions. So depending on the length, depending on how many pages I have left, or then we would go for this or that writer. But we would always try to accommodate the translator's wishes and needs. I'm basically just a bridge, helping them to actually carry their work from Asia to French readers. I'm giving them a platform. That's all I do. And as a publisher, if they say go, I say go. Yeah, that's all it is. Yeah.
Chamu, what specific work is KTLI doing now with Indonesian?
Actually, we are working with Lonta Foundation and Baka Publishing House in Indonesia. So we are in the middle of publishing the short story collection, and we like to involve 1 to 3 short stories from 10 Indonesian authors. So it includes Intan Paramaditha, one of the invited authors, and Clara Ng. So we expect to publish their stories very soon. But at the same time, we look forward to seeing Korean literature in Indonesian translation in Indonesia as well. So it's kind of two-way translation publication project.
Right. How are you finding your translators? Are you networking? Are you finding translators through the translators you're working with currently, or are there other sources, or how do you find your translators?
Usually if you have your own network, and if someone's not available, they recommend another one, and so your network broadens very quickly. Sometimes when we don't know any translator from that region, we inquire at institutions like foundations for literature, or if they can recommend us a good translator. And for us it's very important to be sure that it's a very good translator, because a translation can make or break a literary work, and so you really have to be you have to work with very good ones, the best ones.
Oh, yeah, please.
Just to let me explain how we selected Indonesian short stories, because we work very closely with public institute like Lonta Foundation, and also we work very closely with the authors, like Niran is here, so we kind of consult with those authors and the specialists in their literature. So we would like to get the recommendations from the authors and the Lonta Foundation.
When it comes to translators and finding the right translators, I of course I totally agree that we want to make sure that the translation is perfect and accurate, but we give the chance also to newcomers, and in this journal there's a lot of young translators that have actually never been published before, and the journal serves as some sort of a springboard for them to actually come up into the publishing world and promote their work with French publishers. So that's also very important to me, to not only just promote the translators that you always see and that are very good at what they do, who are very good at what they do, but they also always they already have their own networks of contacts, and and you have to also take care of the little translators.
Yeah.
And in that particular book, Indonesia book, 13 translators in all worked on 20 texts by 20 different writers, and among them three of those translators are very young translators, just out of school. We have this school in France called the INALCO, which is the institute, the National Institute for Oriental Languages and Civilizations, and they speak perfect Indonesian, but they never had a chance to actually do much literary translation work. So they were recommended to me by their professor. And we did a couple of tries, and their texts were later edited and proofread by the professor. And that's how we actually keep the network growing, and maybe give them a vocation. Maybe they would be interested in going forward into becoming maybe a full-time literary translator. And it's important to also give them a chance to showcase their work.
And how do you find? We've talked about finding translators. How are you? What are you finding are the challenges in finding the original work, or what would you say what are the most challenging elements of finding the original works?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I mean, maybe the most challenging thing is that the world is so big, and there's so many beautiful books to look at, that sometimes it's difficult to know which direction to look into, and we want to be as diverse as possible. But that also means that you have to each and every time you dive into a new area that you're not familiar with yet, maybe. For us, it's important to that there's a balance in for example, in the sexes, that you don't that we have at least as many female authors as male authors, and sometimes it still is the case that there's lots of male authors offered to you, so you have to be careful to be not to end up with a male white list. And so that's something we select upon. For me personally, it's very important, the voice of a book, that it's voice driven, and that you really feel that voice grabs you and takes you through the story. Also, the feeling that it's more than just an inward-looking story, but that it also tells you something about the world around this, in which this story takes place. Sometimes that can be political engagement, but the literary quality should always be leading as well. So it's very difficult because any book that's beautiful and that tells a beautiful story and that learns you something, or that surprises you or moves you or touches you, can be interesting and can work. But for me, it's important to fall in love with the book, and also to share that love with my colleagues. They need to be. It's really very nice if everybody feels, well, this is a book we want to fight for, we want to struggle for, to make it work and to make it reach the big audience it deserves. And it's not easy in the English language market. UK and US are difficult markets if you compare them to, for example, the Netherlands, where we have a much stronger tradition in translating literature. We have always had like half of the books that came out were translations, whereas in England and UK and US it's like 3-4%. I don't know the actual percentage, but it's still around that percentage, I guess. You probably know better. But it's so there's a lot of work to be done to make that to introduce new voices into these areas as well, and it should be voices that are convincing, that people are curious about and want to hear. So that's what we try to look for.
Jerome?
Well, I don't know. There's always this argument that publishers are looking for some sort of a universal story that everybody can relate to, and I don't know if universal is exactly the right word to use, because every story has its own context. It might be a romance set in Indonesia, but it's actually the context is very different from a romance set in France. Yeah. So the context is important, and to me it doesn't have to be universal. I think it's a word a bit void of sense, of meaning nowadays. We say everything has to be universal for Western readers, especially to relate to. But when it comes to stories, if there's something you don't know, or if there's something that you can't relate to, or that you're not exactly informed about, that you just Google it and search, and then you'll find what it actually is about. If there's a political context, if there's some other, like, I don't know, regulations that you've never heard about in Indonesia, then you just make your own research and you find out about it. So pretty much any story, to me, can be brought over to foreign readers. I don't see any obstacles.
Yeah.
I don't.
How do you select the projects that you support? We know that the Literary Institute is very generous and, again, remarkably so with the projects that it supports. How do you select what you put your funding toward?
Right. Unfortunately, much of what gets translated, published, and read in Korean publication market today is limited to mainstream literature like English, French, German, and Russian. So we always try to adopt the new voices from other countries. So like I told you before, we work very closely with public institute around the world, like the Dutch Foundation for Literature, Georgian National Book Center, and so forth. So we'd like to receive their recommendations, and we have like a selection committee in ourselves. So we'd like to select the more, which is literary works and which is appealing and new voices to Korean readers.
You know, we've talked a lot about selection and finding work, but then there's always the question of how we actually get it to the readers and how we promote it. How do you promote your books, especially in the very difficult, very crowded U.S. market?
Yeah, for us the promotion and the publicity is actually a very big part of the work, and that's why we also, although the editorial head office is in Amsterdam, but for example, my colleague Christine Swerdowski, who's sitting in the audience too, she takes care of the promotion from New York, from the New York office, and she organizes lots of author tours, and sometimes that can be really huge. Like for example, we have last fall we had Sisonke Mesimang, a South African author, and together with two Dutch authors, they traveled the whole continent from New York to Boston to San Francisco, LA, Vancouver, the whole tour. And we then from festival to festival and bookstore to bookstore. So really trying to arrange as many meetings with the audience you hope to reach, so that they can meet the author, hear them read and talk about their work. Those meetings are really very important. And the other way is, of course, to get these authors, to try to get them reviewed. So you have to establish a whole network with journalists and all over the US and the UK. Our London-based publicist is doing the same thing in the UK, and we try to ask other authors, which is always difficult because the established authors, if they want to endorse these new voices that we want to introduce, they often say no, unfortunately, because they're busy writing, and which is of course a good reason. But it's really helpful if they do give an endorsement, like we had Alice Sebold giving an endorsement to a still unknown Dutch author, and that really helps. What else? We have just Christine has just set up a huge campaign with booksellers all over the world. We had a German author, Pierre Jarawan, and she has approached many booksellers in different countries to read the book and to say what they thought about it. And so from all these gathered quotes, she made a landing page with to share these quotes on social media, and that social media is getting more and more important, especially if you're a small publisher and you can't bring all the authors over to the US or the UK, especially if they come from far. But so for us also, all these institutions like yours and like the institutions that give translation grants are very important because we couldn't do it without these institutions. It's really necessary to get this financial support, and sometimes they also support it in a promotional way. For example, the same author I just mentioned, Pierre Jarawan, the Goethe institutions in the US, they arranged part of his tour. So there's lots of Goethe institutions in the States, in different cities, and he can go from one city to another to talk about his work and to read from his work. So it's vital to do as much as you can in as many ways possible, and there's not just only one way. You have to be active in all these in all these forms and ways. Yeah. And so, it's very important to work with people who have the same dedication and who have who really have the ambition to build these bridges and to bring these voices out into the world. And we have a very good team. I'm very happy and very proud to what we just started in the US in September with the first publication. So we're very new. But we have had 3 great reviews in the New York Times already.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. And Kirkus and Publishers Weekly, and lots of good press, and that's really helpful. And we keep up the good work.
Terrific. Jerome, how do you promote once you've published?
We try to organize events as much as we can. Whenever a new book comes out, we would actually, like for example, the Taiwanese issue, which came out 2 years ago. We had a couple of events, not only in France but also in Taiwan. I myself live in Malaysia, so it's quite easy for me to just go around all around Asia to arrange some events. And those books are sold in French bookstores all around Asia. There's quite a few bookstores in Bangkok, in Hong Kong, in Taipei. And so the books can actually be found in those places. And whenever there's a new book coming out, we try to organize events in that particular bookstore. For example, there's a big French bookstore in Taipei. And we actually invited there were 6 of the writers who took part in the collection. There were also 3 of the translators who are based in Taiwan, and we had a big event all together to actually celebrate the launch of the book and to initiate some sort of dialogue between translators, readers, and writers. We did the same thing in Paris in a specialized bookstore specialized in Asian literature. We had 4 of the translators coming over to talk about their work. And I'm planning to do the exact same thing with an Indonesia book. We're having an event next week in Paris at the INALCO to launch the book with some of the translators. I was hoping to be able to bring some of the writers right after London, that they would hop on the Eurostar with me, but unfortunately it's not possible. But we're going to meet again in Indonesia, especially you, Nirwan. Yes, I'll meet you in Indonesia, and we're going to promote the book with the French-speaking community in Indonesia, and also with Indonesian readers who can read French and who just want to celebrate the translation of more Indonesian literature into foreign languages. So we'll have translators and writers coming together to around a few cities in Indonesia. I think we're going to do around Jakarta, Surabaya, Bali, wherever there's a French institute or an Alliance Française, we'll do an event there. So a few events are planned for this year.
How much of your distribution? What's the percentage between continental France and Asia, the French stores in Asia?
Most in terms of sales, my main market is still France and French-speaking countries in Europe, like Belgium and Switzerland, and a bit in Quebec as well. But the French bookstores around Asia do account for quite a bit. Maybe, I don't know, I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly, but maybe 15 to 20%. That's very good. And it's they're very much helpful. They're always happy to when a new issue comes out because they have like regular customers that would come and ask, "Oh, so when is the new issue coming out?" And so they're, yeah, it's. I'm very happy that the books are actually available there in Asia, not only in France.
Jérôme, have any of the authors that you've published in your anthologies, in your magazines, gone on to publish books as a result?
Yes.
Very good.
Not many. I mean, there's. I'm reaching like almost 10 issues with the biannual, and 3 special issues dedicated to particular countries. And out of these so many books, so far I know of two Asian writers who have been published and picked up by French publisher. So it's not many. That's because all these books amount maybe to something like 120 writers or so, maybe more. So it's 2 out of so many. It's very little, but it's still. I'm always very happy to know that.
Absolutely.
That a writer has been picked up. Not necessarily thanks to the journal, but just that. Yeah, I was able to maybe pass the word along, and and it got picked up.
Very good. Chunwoo, what are your current major projects, or what are you currently working on in addition to Indonesia for other Asian languages? I know that's a big question, isn't it?
Yes, it's unfortunately Indonesian language is the only Asian languages that we are dealing with. But apart from Indonesian one, we are working with Dutch Foundation for Literature. So we plan to publish modern classic fiction from Dutch author. What was the name?
Bordewijk.
Bordewijk. Yeah, the character. So yeah, and also we're planning to publish Belarusian poetry collection.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. And what about in the other direction? What Korean? What projects do you have going out of Korean into other languages?
Oh, thank you for the question. And well, actually, we have a grants program, so we try to inform our grants program to foreign publishers as many as possible. So please do, if you're interested in publishing Korean literature, please do visit our website. So we have like Susan explained, we have a generous grants program. So please do let us know if you're interested in publishing Korean literature. And we support translation and or publication grants to foreign publisher. If you would like to publish Korean literature, Korean fiction, for instance, we support up to $5,000 for publication grants, and also $16,000 for translation grants for a full-length novel. So that's average grants amount. So
I think South Korea is pretty much a pioneer in that when it comes to like translation and publication program, right?
Yes.
A lot of countries are trying to emulate the Korean model. If I'm not mistaken, I know Taiwan now is a very strong model as well.
That's right.
Indonesia is building one, which is also quite good.
Yes.
And Thailand is looking into it. So I think it's very important for all these countries to actually come up with something.
Yes.
And you've been showing them the way.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes. No, Korea's always been, again, as I said, very, very generous with the and very, very smart support. So, other general comments about your programs or about what you're looking forward to. Specifically, what are you looking forward to at the fair in terms of Indonesian?
we publish novels and memoirs, so that's a restriction. I would love to. I'm jealous when I hear you speak about these short stories and poetry, and I hope that we will be able to do that later on. But being a small publisher, having to conquer these new markets, it's too difficult to start out with short stories and poetry. So we are concentrating on high quality novels and memoirs that are literary but also accessible. It could be any. So if any of you has suggestions, I'm really open to any suggestions I receive, and I've already been looking around in the Indonesian pavilion. I'll go back there later on to have a closer look. It's always during these fairs you have a lot of meetings, but you also have a lot of people that you meet unexpectedly and advice you get unexpectedly, which is can be also very inspiring. And this has been a very good start for the book fair already, because we've already been able to exchange some information, and now I know where to find these guys. That's the way it works. It's not that you're looking for a specific thing, it's just that you're open to finding beautiful books. Beautiful.
How about you, Jerome? What are you looking forward to this week?
I'm looking forward to spending time with my Indonesian friends to promote more of Indonesian literature with all the publishers around. I'm actually also working not only as a publisher but as a literary agent for a French literary agency.
You are a double agent.
I am a double agent, yes, and we do represent a couple of Indonesian writers. One is Leila Khudori, and the other one is the great writer Pramudia Anantatur. And so we have a number of works that we want to submit and suggest to publishers, and all the writers that have been taking part in this book are also fantastic writers. There's more, unfortunately. If I could put more in each and every book, I would, but 20 is the max I could do. But there's so many other out there, and some of them have been invited. There's 12 writers in total that have been invited this year, and more also have been invited by their publishers. So it's not only 12; it's a big group of writers, and I really encourage all of you to read their stories, to try and meet them because they're around, and engage with them and learn more about Indonesia. It's a golden occasion to actually discover new works, be they short stories, poetry, or novels.
And Chang-Woo?
We're done with translating Indonesian short stories into Korean already. So we look to make a progress of doing publishing Korean short stories in Indonesian. So we'll have meetings with Baka Publishing House and the Lonta Foundation. We'd like to make a progress on Indonesian part as well. So at the same time, we'll have meetings with literary agent and publishers and translators. So we'd like to introduce more interesting Korean literature. So we have interesting partial translations as well. So hopefully we'll meet as many publishers and agents during the week. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions from the floor? Yes.
Well, when it comes to working with other people beyond Lontar, I have worked with literary translators who were totally not affiliated with Lontar and who submitted work to me without actually going through Lontar. And so I've done this before, but for this particular issue, yeah, it is something that we did in partnership with Lontar. And I had no idea at that time. I had never heard anything about Lontar in that respect, the criticism that has been going on. So I'm totally unaware, truly, of what's going on. But when it comes to selecting the text and the writers, I found them to be very open-minded and to have actually really helped us make a great selection. They were open to all the criteria that we gave them, which was we're trying to find a balance in terms of gender, like you mentioned, in terms of also geographical areas, so that everything. I mean, the whole book could actually give some sort of sense of like representing the whole of Indonesia, which is of course impossible, but. I think we did our best in terms of the selection process, and Lontar was very helpful. So I have no way to actually contradict or criticize or in any way. I'm unaware of all this.
I don't.
Okay, I'll make sure comment on your question. And well, like Jerome, I haven't aware about the controversies, but we had started this project with Lontar Foundation about 2 years ago. So I believe Lontar Foundation did a great job on suggesting great Indonesian short stories. But we are always open to work with great people. We are not limited to Lontar Foundation. We are not limited to work with certain limited person or organization. We are always open to work with great people. So thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
It's world editions. I have some leaflets with me. Anyone who's interested can come and get them. It's our catalog with the authors we've been publishing in the UK and the US. We have at the moment we have a different list for the UK and for the US. So I have 2 catalogs with me. Sorry? Oh yes, endorsements. With endorsements, I mean that these established authors give a quote, and it can be just 1 or 2 sentences, telling how important this particular book or this particular author is, or how much they liked it, how much they enjoyed reading it. It's just an enthusiastic blurb. Which can be very short, and we use it on the cover of the books. So it helps if you can on the cover of the book, if you can print that so and so important author everybody knows, thinks that this is a voice worth listening to. So that's it is really helpful. So yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Well, like I said, so far all the stories that have been published in Gentaiu only helped 2 or 3 writers to actually find a publisher in France. But every time a new book, a new Gentaiu comes out, I ask the translator specifically, who do you want me to send a copy to? Do you want me to send it to so-and-so publishers? I actually hand out a few like paper copies, but also a lot of PDF copies to publishers so as to promote those writers' works and those literary translators with publishers, so that they're just to put their name out there and to publishers, so that hopefully one publisher will get back to me or to them and be interested in learning more about that particular writer. So that's how I try to push the works of literary translators, by handing out a lot of copies and yeah, it's not.
Okay. Yes, one last question.
Question.
About
online selling. All the books are actually can be purchased under the ebook form as well, and there's an ebook format, and so I promote. We have several distribution platforms in France which are specifically dedicated to promoting ebooks, whether EPUBs or mobile or PDFs, and you can find this literary journal on all those platforms. And at the moment, I would say digital sales in terms of global sales is not much. It's around 4 to 5%, but it's growing, and I do get quite a regular number of orders in the forms of ebooks. I don't know about world editions.
Yeah, well, it's a small percentage, but it's easy because you don't need to transport these books. Yeah, we have every book we produce, we make an ebook as well. Yeah.
Okay, I think that.
There's one lady.
I'm sorry. Yes, one final question. No?
Maltese is Australian author. Maltese, Australian.
Okay, yeah. Well, interested in anything to consider, yeah. So,
Okay.
you'll give me your details later on. Okay.
Okay, I think that will wrap us up. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thanks to all of you for coming. And again, any questions that you have for our panelists, I think you can ask them now privately. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Susanne.